1974. Harold Wilson is Prime Minister, just about. The IRA are busy bombing Britain. What with that, fuel restrictions, power cuts and Pan's people, Britain is frankly a bit crap. So who would want to live in a place like this? Well, my family did. It was in the spring of 1974. In the week after ABBA won Eurovision, my mum brought me and her other 2 children to Britain to join our dad. After more than 10 years apart, he finally had the money to bring us over. We were leaving Pakistan for the promised land. The only thing was, no one had told us that our promised land was for everyone else a bit of a joke.
Were you truly wafted here from paradise?
No, Luton Airport.
Actually, it was a lot of a joke.
You took me to the restaurant where we first met.
It's 30 years later. These days I work as a writer and I live in London. But it is Luton which is my hometown, and all my life it has been the butt of other people's jokes. At first it was funny, but when I read that Luton was being described as a hotbed of Islamic terrorism, that was worrying for a Muslim like myself. And on top of all that, Luton has just been voted the crappiest town in the country. That can't be right. I might not live there now, but it's still where my friends and family live. There was only one way to find out if all the terrible things that people are saying about Luton were true. It was time to go back home. By luck, Luton's mayor was making an official visit to the Arndale shopping centre the very day I arrived in town. She was there to turn on the Christmas lights. Maybe she could enlighten me about Luton.
What do you think about all these kind of polls which say that Luton's crap?
They've never been to Luton and they're just jealous. We've now got all our big plans for regeneration of the town.
Yeah.
And it's all go.
I mean, what about sort of like the Asian community? Because I can't imagine there were too many Asians in the late 50s, and that's really changed as well, hasn't it?
No, yes, a large Asian community now. It's a good community, gets involved in the life of the town beautifully, and we're all one big happy family.
Thank you, take care.
Okay, I see you.
She sounded so cheerful, but I wasn't sure if it was insight or naivety. Was Luton really one big happy family? It was getting late and I had to get back to mine. This is the family home, or actually homes. We own both houses. In one is my sister and my mum, who's in Pakistan right now, and next door is my brother with his wife and 2 children. The reason we are all here is that over 40 years ago, my dad left Pakistan with nothing for the land of
I know I'd go from rags to riches if you would only say you care.
That's my dad. He's looking younger than I ever remember him. He got here, settled, spent the next 11 years working. I think he was a postman at one point. I think he worked in a chicken factory at another point. Just did lots of different jobs. It was a life of a lot of single guys living in these small houses. Some people would be working at night time and some would be working at daytime. And the ones who worked during the night would basically come in the morning, and the people who worked in the day would have to get out of the house because there would be a new shift of people to sleep. These weren't people who were enjoying the fruits of 60s, because their lives were basically focused on quite a simple aim, which was to earn enough money so that they could afford to get the rest of their family over to this country. When we arrived, Dad was working at the Vauxhall car factory, which in its glory days used to employ 40,000 people.
He'd come from an office job back in Pakistan, but in this country he could only ever get manual work.
We have worked this country.
The time that my dad was working in the factory, what my mum did, like a lot of people, was she made dresses at home. I think they'd get 35 pence per dress or something like that, and the whole family would help. So it would be like a collective effort. and I would help even though I was only about 5 or 6, and you know, my older brother and my older sister would help, and my dad, when he came over from Vauxhall, he would help, and we would work till like 1 in the morning. Our first home in Luton was in Bury Park. It was where the Pakistanis settled, and it's where most of them still live. It's also where these 3 men, who were at Vauxhall at the same time as my father, also live.
I pity the poor immigrant who wishes he would have stayed home.
How do you feel about Luton?
Luton is my own place. I love Luton. I like Luton. I'm very happy. It's very nice.
The Britain is just similar to our country, where we come from.
And what happened in the evenings? What did you do when after work? What did you do at night time?
Oh, you ask myself, I was a young man at the time. I went out.
Was it a good time to be a young man?
Very good time. I never forget. I had a very good time.
And what were the English people like? What were the white people like when you first came?
I think the England is because I've been all over in my own time, this time. One of the civilized country in the world. One of the best country in the world.
And you still think that, even after having lived here 40 years?
If I got any problem, then I leave it. I go somewhere else.
So you never had any trouble with white people?
Never had trouble. Why, if you look for a trouble, they give you the trouble. If you don't look for a trouble, nobody bother you.
You didn't have to look for trouble during the 70s.
Everybody was
There was kung fu fighting in the charts and Paki bashing on the streets. The NF were looking so dangerous that politicians tried to sound like them.
People are really rather afraid that this country might be rather swamped by people with a different culture.
Blair Peach was murdered whilst protesting against racists. And in the autumn of 1979, a few months after Margaret Thatcher moved into her new home on Downing Street, we left Bury Park into the very white Marsh Farm. At the time, it was a real jump up. Because, you know, if you look at Bury Park, it's kind of industrial and it's grimy and all the houses are all tightly together. And then you go to Marsh Farm and there's like greenery and there's grass, and when you go out the front door you can't see any cars. So it was a real step up. But one of the kind of big consequences of that is we were much further away from the rest of the Pakistani population in the town. I don't remember being bothered about that because I was too busy making new friends, like Scott McKenzie, who was my best mate through junior and high school. That's us on a Lee Manor school trip in France in the summer of 1983.
If you sort of describe it to somebody, they'd imagine there was more trouble than there was.
Yeah.
You know, you come from Bury Park, all Asian, and you come and you're like the one little Asian kid in school.
Yeah.
And yet, actually, it was all totally
Were you the only Asian?
pretty much. I mean,
Yeah, I think there was 2 or 3, wasn't there? There was.
But I mean, it wasn't like majority. I mean, you know, you were definitely.
No, I don't remember you getting teased. Maybe you do.
No, I really don't. And I think one of the reasons was, I don't know why, but I think part of it was like, if you kind of fit in and you kind of like, you sort of are interested in the same sort of thing, then you're not an outsider, are you? Because you're actually into all the same kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's right.
Because like my dad basically, you know, when he was pretty sceptical about sort of things, and he was like, oh yeah, you know, English people, they'll go to school with you or they'll work with you because they have to, but they won't let you into their houses.
I remember knocking on your door and saying, "Is Saf in?" He's saying no, and you were at the window waving at me. And we were young then. But he wanted you to study, didn't he?
Yeah, he did.
My education mattered so much to my dad because he wanted me to fulfill my potential in a way that he had not been allowed to fulfill his. My dad was one of these people whose education and economic standing in terms of how the census would sort of record him had nothing to do with what he was really like. So, you know, if somebody sort of looked at him economically, they'd say, okay, you work at Vauxhall, you live in a pretty crap house, and you don't have much money coming in, so you're probably what, social class D or E or something. And yet, he used to read the Financial Times, he'd wake up in the morning and listen to the Today programme, the TV he watched was Panorama, the Money programme, the news. He had aspirations and the cultural consumption of somebody who was much, much better off than he actually was. People My father thought that when we moved into Marsh Farm, we were moving up. But my brother and I soon realised that we had traded in our Pakistani neighbourhood for a white working-class housing estate. Well, basically, this house which we bought in '79 is all private area. All these houses are all privately owned. But just across the road from there, that's like hardcore Marsh Farm area.
That's where we had some rights some years back, and so not a desirable and well-known place in Luton to live in, yeah. And we realised that after we moved in here, yeah. For all the time we lived here, I never felt comfortable, never felt safe here.
Police and community leaders are still trying to find an explanation for what caused a second night of rioting on a housing estate in Luton. Shops on the Marsh Farm housing estate were looted and schools were set on fire as around 300 youths went on the rampage.
It wasn't until 1994 that Marsh Farm became nationally notorious. But during my teenage years, I looked for escape through television and music. And it was through music that salvation finally came. Up till then I'd been listening to music which had just been pop music and just regular Western English music or whatever, which didn't really do you any good, you know what I mean? It was just escapism. And then suddenly you hear this guy and he's like talking about specific things which are absolutely my experience. He's talking about parents working in factories, he's talking about growing up in places and wanting to get out, he's talking about trying to make a better life for yourself. Just made an absolute complete emotional connection, and the sort of connections you make when you're 16 you never ever make again. They are just really, really powerful and you don't forget them, and so I think that's why it was like the right time and it was the right message.
I think the whole thing is crap. Maybe he has an appreciation for things which I don't understand, but to me, listening to Bruce Springsteen's stories and songs, the way he takes inspiration from lyrics and that kind of thing, to me that's going a bit too deep. So
it wasn't just my brother who didn't understand my Bruce obsession. My parents had their own worries. I think they felt a bit threatened because when you're given sort of Pakistani culture just in your house, it's quite difficult to compete with the massive volume of influences that are coming out from the TV and from outside the house. And they were worried that basically the West was going to submerge and overwhelm the old values. They used to constantly remind, remember you're Pakistani, remember you're Muslim, don't forget those roots. The whites will never totally assume that you're white. They will always see you as different. And so if you try and pretend that you're like them, all that'll happen is that you'll be completely lost because you'll be trying to pretend to be something that you're not, and you'll have completely lost who you really were as well. When I used to live here, most of my Saturdays were spent here in the Arndale Centre. There used to be a fountain, and in the middle was a flock of plastic pink flamingos. People would throw pennies into the fountain and make a wish. I used to wish for something more interesting to do on a Saturday than staring at plastic birds in the middle of a shopping centre. The pink flamingos flew away a long time ago, and eventually, so did I.
I'm free to be whatever I choose, and I'll sing the blues if I want. I'm free.
I went to university in Manchester and loved it so much that I stayed even after graduating. Like Luton, Manchester also had an Arndale Centre, but it had Affleck's Palace, the Hacienda, and Nolan Leon. It was only the sudden death of my father from a heart attack 10 years ago which took me back to Luton. He was 62. After he died, my brother took on the role of head of the family.
I like taking responsibilities, but I just wish, extra help would make my life easier, So if, for example, my brother, was to, to be honest, I'm a little bit upset with him on that side. I just think that he could do more.
I'm not very good with money, and
but,
so
I honestly think, if he was to help me with more, we could achieve a hell of a lot more. But I know it's not really his area. And to be honest, I respect him for that. I mean, I don't expect, us, to be honest, some of the things he likes, I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't be writing books, and and I always knew that he may start falling behind on the financial side, and I just feel it's my job to help him along on that side, because I would not feel comfortable. Let's say hypothetically, if I'm worth 10 million, hypothetically, I would like him to be worth at least a few million.
That is a very Asian or Pakistani thing, isn't it? Because I don't think English people would necessarily give a monkeys if their brother wasn't doing it.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I would feel absolutely gutted, if I thought that, my standard of living was so much higher than his or another member of the family.
My brother feels that way because family obligation is a big deal in the Pakistani community. It gets drummed into you from childhood.
Yes, we're living in the love of the common people. Smiles from the heart of a family.
For some whites, communities might be what they watch in soap operas, but for Bury Park's Pakistanis, communities are where they live, and for a local businessman like Nadeem, they don't want to live anywhere else.
Luton's a very, loving community. It was all linked with each other. I mean, just the image that Luton's, people say, oh, Luton's a dump, Luton's this, but it's not like that. Once you live here, I mean, we've been brought up here. It's a beautiful place to live in. I mean, if I go to London and I spend a day in London, and as soon as I come through the bridges through Bury Park, I feel at home. I feel happy. I'm back in Bury Park.
Probably the most famous person to have come from Luton is Paul Young. I really wanted to meet him, but when I tried to contact him, his agent told me that Paul hasn't lived in Luton for 20 years, and it's a time in his life he's trying to forget. So I didn't get to meet Paul, but I did meet Khalid, another singer who is trying to make it big without leaving Luton.
I would like to show you my studio where I do my vocals. It's
okay, where is
there,
it?
yes. In here.
It's pretty cozy in here, isn't it?
It is, and it's nicely padded, soundproofed it is, and so this is where I do the vocals. This song is already with the company. They will be bringing out in market soon. They are based in Manchester. It's called there's two so. सानू भुल गई वलैत विच जाके यारी आसा गरीबा नाल लाके सानू भुल गई वलैत विच जाके यारी आसा गरीबा नाल लाके ओ ओ ओ ओ कुड़ी बड़ी माड़ी निकली हाय 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 कुड़ी बड़ी माड़ी निकली. It's a Punjabi song. That is.
I understood some of that. It was something about going to England. And
yes.
So what do you do when you're not singing? Do you have another job as well? Or?
Yes, I have a job. I'm a driving instructor.
Oh, okay.
Yes. And
are they chickens in the back there?
Yes.
Are they pets or food?
Well, they're pets if you like, yes. One is called Tracy, that one there. A blue one, and the other one is called Fizzy.
Fizzy?
Yes.
Are these the first chickens you've had, or have you had other ones?
Oh, I've had chickens before, but then, they come and go, isn't it? Yes.
There's a really lovely view here you've got.
Yes, I'm proud of this, and that is why I like Luton here. You get very good view. Hilly,
Is it a good place to be a creative person, to be a singer? I mean, is it
Why not, yes. Why not?
Have you been anywhere else?
I have lived in Watford, and that is where I was trained as a singer at Watford School of Music, and I worked there as well. I went to college there, but then end of the day I wanted to come back to Luton because I thought I've got a lot of friends here, and I feel like home here,
I'm not sure if the music industry is yet ready for Khalid, but it struck me that whether his music career takes off or not, he has achieved a more enviable type of success. He is one of those fortunate people who is happy with where they are in the world, happy in Luton. And he's not alone. Maz and Saeed have recently returned to Luton from London. They run a successful wedding business. Eastern Touch specialised in organising weddings for the Pakistani community, and after years in London, the boys discovered that their old local connections helped their business take off.
When we've gone to clients' houses or viewings, the amount of times it's, oh, we know so-and-so, oh, we know so-and-so.
Yeah.
And you, through that visit, who you've just met them for the first time, you realise that they know someone else that you know.
Everyone knows everyone. Basically, we've ended up going to clients' houses, and we've done nearly every single one of their relatives who've got married this year. In a way, I've got back to my roots, because in London, to an extent, I felt like I was losing my identity, and I didn't know even weddings or the culture and how it was supposed to be. Now back in Luton, I feel like I've got back to my roots.
For me, it's the same sort of thing.
I've got that old time religion in my heart. It's way down inside. I've got that new kind of feeling in my heart. Real up eyes. Nobody knows what it means to me. Nobody knows but my God.
Islam is the glue that binds the Pakistani community together. The religion is social, it's not just spiritual. But because of the reports of Muslim extremism in Luton, the town isn't now just considered crap. These days, it's also thought dangerous. And the man from the mosque says that people from here are more religious than those in Pakistan.
I think so that people who are living here, they are more religious than Pakistani people. If we will not be religious ourselves, our coming generation will not be religious. Therefore, most of the people, they try their best that they should become a good Muslim.
Nice plan, but in the papers and on the news, it's not good Muslims you hear about, it's very bad Muslims.
Good evening. A massive joint operation between Scotland Yard and MI5 has foiled an alleged terrorist plot.
At dawn today, 24 raids carried out simultaneously across southeast England.
This isn't the first time Luton's been connected to terrorist activities.
It's only after the reporters leave that it was revealed that no one was actually charged for those raids, but the damage to Muslims and Luton was done. And with all that negative press, it's not all that surprising that Pakistani Muslims are digging deeper into their religion. It's a way of connecting back to their heritage and past. For them, being a Muslim is a personal and private act. But for the Muslims you mostly hear about, their religion isn't just personal, it's political. They're the ones who are most likely to turn out to listen to the sermons of extremist clerics.
Mr. Blanket, he keep eye on us. I don't know how. Mr. Blanket declare publicly, I keep eyes on those extremists. And every day he show us his hatred to Islam and Muslims.
Every program that features Muslims usually has footage of a man in a beard waving his arms about and shouting. I didn't want to feel left out, so this is
And
why.
they said we fight against terrorism. And they kill 600,000 men and women, bombing them day and night. And when they did not reach anyone from Al-Qaeda and they feel embarrassing, they start to arrest anybody got beard. Because anyway, they are Muslims.
But if the man in the beard sounds unreasonable to you, you're not the only one. Most Muslims would agree, but hearing them doesn't make good television, like a ranting and roving Omar Bakri does. Because we lived away from Bury Park, we were never deeply immersed into religion. My father didn't fast, and I stopped once it interfered with my exams. But I heard about one man who wasn't Pakistani, who had fasted for the whole month of Ramadan. Mark Sheeman is Luton's Green Party candidate for the next election. He sounded like he was worth meeting.
It was actually a wonderful experience because I'm used to drinking at least 6 cups of tea during the day, and it was lovely to have control over my body, to be able to say, no, I'm not going to do this, and it almost felt as if there was something helping me. Really, I think we should always look for what unites us, what the similarities are, rather than what the differences are. And by getting to know the Islamic community, I've discovered there's a wealth of similarities.
If there was somebody whose only view of Luton was that it was a crap place to live and it was full of terrorists, what would be your message to them to try and convince them that that wasn't the case?
Come here, sit with people, come to places like this, sit with people, talk with people, enjoy their company, and see them as human beings, fellow human beings, not someone that's strange or that you've got to look at strangely or fear, but just say, yep, hello, and discuss things and get to know, and then you'll understand the real warmth and strength of what is Luton.
I left him with my heart full of joy for Luton. The sky seemed less grey, the concrete less drab. No one in this town seemed to have a bad word to say about it, so why are others so keen on slagging it off? It seemed time to confront the man behind the Crap Towns book.
You know, the most obvious thing, and it's the first thing you see when you go to Luton, is that it was just brutally ugly. There's the whole Irondale Centre. It's just a big mess, which is not only, aesthetically people don't like it, it's actually falling down now as well, even though it's less than 50 years old.
What I sort of find funny, and it's not particularly just about you, but people who go to Cambridge, who study classics, who live in Oxford, taking the piss out of people who don't get a chance to go to Oxford, who don't get a chance to study classics, and who have to live in places which might not be ugly but are their homes. And I think that's the sort of thing which I find a little bit more offensive about it.
Well, yeah, I'm not denying that I've had a pretty lucky upbringing, but... So
who are you to take the piss out of people?
The easy answer is that it's not me taking the piss, it's people from the towns that are making the nominations, and that's what the books are based on. But it doesn't mean that my viewpoint's not valid about these places either.
Said you took a big trip. They said you moved away.
I set out to make a film about Luton. Actually, I ended up making a film about myself. When I first left Luton, I was sure that I had nothing to lose and a life to gain. I realise now that it's not so easy to untangle yourself from the ties that bind, because with every choice made, there is a price to pay. So in a way, it's a story of betterment. It's not the only story of betterment. You can stay in Luton and better yourself. But for every choice that I've made in terms of, moving from one house to another which is more white and less Asian, or going to a university which is predominantly white, or moving into an industry which is predominantly middle class, whatever. Almost by definition, you are steering further and further away from some of the essence of where you started out, and you can't help that. In the end, the only question you have to answer is if the price is worth paying. That's a question for me, but it was also a question for my father, who travelled further and risked more, but did not live to see how his gamble played out. His story, like mine, is one of betterment at a price, so was it worth it? Well, in my case and his, I think it was, actually.